Jacksonville, the child was born that couldn't sit still. 86 years later with no regret. You know that man can't sit still yet. The Great Depression couldn't get him down. He worked for his dad's store in town, collecting money in small amounts. Poor whites and blacks in their furniture accounts. Stetson Kennedy wants us all to be free. Stetson Kennedy wants us all to be free. As he'd collect, he'd talk to folks. He'd hear legends, tales, songs, and jokes. Now this fine treasure he'd record and write. He was colorblind, didn't see black and white. Writer's project for the WPA. Zora Neale Hurston, he earned his pay. Crackers and blacks, they talk for hours. It was a barefoot history, this land of flowers.
On the last day of August 2019, actually the 31st of August, the week that was, from WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network via various outlets, etc. This was an interesting week in that we had a number of events and they basically are related. Climate change. Hurricane Dorian. Hurricane Dorian, of course, is moving towards Florida. We'll get to that in a minute, but there's several scenarios. It could, in fact, slide around Florida, but still you'd have torrential rains. Once again, that would appear on a Monday or Tuesday there. We'll have more forecasts. We just working with what we have at this time and fall back on the Sentinel in Miami, Florida. Or excuse me, well, the Sentinel in Orlando, Florida. We'll get it right in a minute here. And we have Uncle Carl, which ties into a number of things that has happened. Christian Gillibrand has abandoned her presidential campaign due to a lack of polling and also of resources. And this sort of tunes into Uncle Carl's article in the Wall Street Journal. We won't spend a lot of time on it because basically just the title is Biden takes his term in the barrel. What Uncle Carl is talking about, the barrel, is where a candidate will be severely criticized, some deserving, some not, by other candidates and by what Uncle Carl calls punditry. Well, there's no doubt about that. In the old days, we used to say that the newspapers needed to sell newspapers. Of course, now it's clicks on their various digital outlets. So you'll see stories. The question is, Joe Biden has been covered extensively in the press since he has been on the political scene for many, many years, over 30 years. He was a vice president under President Barack Obama. Thus, he was on the campaign trail constantly defending and defining President Obama. So that in itself gives him a public exposure, much actually more so than DJ Trump. Of course, DJ Trump was in reality shows and various other things out there, but now DJ Trump has a political record. Of course, Biden has his going back to 30 plus years in the Senate of the United States. He was on the Judiciary Committee. But at the same time, he rode the train from Washington back to Delaware, where his children were at the time. making a daily trip to Delaware. So thus he is a father, a grandfather, and a patriot. That we have to give him, whether we agree with him or disagree with some of his positions. He is the classic liberal candidate. Now, we clear up a little bit of this in terms of where the candidates are. Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren are social democrats, progressives. Biden is the traditional liberal. And then you have several others there in the quintet. Andrew Yang, more of a liberal type, I suppose, on the scene. Business-friendly person to a point. He has a national income program. Senator Booker of New Jersey, a classic liberal running out of New Jersey. Of course, his former city, the urban ghetto of Newark, has come to the spotlight on the problem of water, and that is an infrastructure problem. Now, a very interesting problem there. Infrastructure, who is responsible for infrastructure? Is it Essex County? That's the county that Newark is in. The state of New Jersey. Well, all of those are there, and of course, the city of Newark and their pipes. That is a problem there. Now the county has said, well, we'll fix the pipes over 3 years. Well, that's not good enough. There has to be an action plan. DJ Trump, since he's good at this, he does know something of construction, should send in the Army Corps of Engineers. And they should make a study and then do the appropriate things to fix those water lines. The Army Corps of Engineers literally built highways, byways all over Germany, all over Iraq, and over Afghanistan. So they know how to build roads. They know how to build water lines. They know how to build sewage lines. So that's not a problem for the Army Corps of Engineers. And with the funding and the resources, they can send in the Army. Literally. And they could get that pipeline finished in a matter of days and not of years. Needs to be a priority project, and they need to work 24/7. That can be easily done. The climate is not forbidden in Newark. Therefore, they can work at night as well as in day. And if they started right now, they could get to those pipes, start clearing out the bad sections of pipe. Basically, what they're clearing out is pipes that are not suited, and placing copper pipes in there, whatever they need to do to take care of that problem. Now, prior to the EPA coming in and publicly announcing the water was not fit for human consumption, they used filters, but the filters evidently were not working. However, though, the tests that they had was involved minuscule amount of dwellings, less than 10, which is ridiculous. But they need to take command and control of this project. The Corps was in New Orleans after Katrina, and under, I forget the colonel's name, that was the general's name actually, that was in charge there. It was a Louisianan, an African American, and a man on a mission, and they accomplished the mission. Now, a little bit different in Louisiana in that it was a huge project. Bidding and things of that nature had to be done. They had to clear away the debris. And President Carter, on touring the area, said, well, basically, they had not gotten it cleared away as quickly as they can. Now, these things can be done with the modern equipment they have. They can do it much more quickly than one would imagine. But in Newark, it's not a matter of clearing away debris. It's a matter of digging up old lines and putting in new lines. And also, the city of Newark is compact. It's not a sprawling city, so thus easier access to the old pipelines. And it's not their water treatment plant, it is the pipelines. So now they're distributing water at stations and delivering water to the residents of Newark. But part of the problem there was the administration, it appears under Mayor Baraka, made an error in that they did not attack this particular problem aggressively. And those kinds of positions come back and bite you in the ass every time. But the situation goes back to Senator Booker when he presided over Newark. So in other words, the problems in Newark were long-serving problems that happened because various administrations did not do their jobs. And again, they are limited because you have to work with the county, which is above city government, as Reverend Jackson would say, and with the state of New Jersey, which has used Newark as a political football. It is a majority African-American city, and that is where it stood. And to add insult to injury, political class in Newark and various suburbs was celebrating the music awards at the Prudential Center that is in downtown Newark. Our former music director, L.A. Beal Graham, used to live within, I believe, a block of that center in downtown, and also that is very close to St. John's University. So we have a number of things going on in the city of Newark. So that is one of the things that will haunt Senator Booker. He will be in the barrel, but not like Joe Biden. Now back to Joe Biden and his barrel. Well, Joe Biden has a record, but the highlights of the record have already come out. And the whole idea of political campaigns is you bring out, quote-unquote, the dirt early. For the candidate's sake, even the candidate himself or herself leaked the information. They have talked about his work on the Judiciary Committee, the passing of the crime bill. Everybody knows about that. As LBJ would say, it's been to a goat roping contest. And I imagine that Joe Biden has seen a few goat roping contests. Now, that is out there. And the testimony before the Judiciary Committee with Anita Hill, that drum has been beaten until the skin of the drum itself is exhausted. So that issue is out there also. And as far as Biden hugging people on the campaign trail, well, that's the type of candidate he is. But people come up and hug him now that he's initiating it. So in other words, that kills that story off. And then we go to the nature of the American body politic. And the nature of the American body politic, whether it be these right-wingers that are presently occupying 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, are a moderate administration like Wild Bill Clinton ran. Wild Bill Clinton deregulated things, so deregulation was part of the problem. He played to the emotions of people with the so-called crime bill. They all did. Even Jesse Jackson at the time looked more favorably upon it. But again, that was a different type of situation. People did not know the consequences, the overall consequences, that it would lock up young African Americans for 20 years and 30 years for very minor offenses. This is a so-called law and order situation that started with Clinton, and also the issue of quote-unquote welfare. Now that is one of the racist issues, because they're assuming that the majority of people quote-unquote on welfare at that time were African Americans. Latinos did not play into the scenario at that particular time. Well, they had welfare reform, and as Wild Bill Clinton said, well, this takes the illness off of people that are on the welfare program because they no longer have the welfare program. No doubt. But at the same, in other words, that moves it off the plate and out of the political bail, so to speak. And we had the reform. We, the American people, did. They put in things such as child care and various other subsidy programs there, housing, etc. And the idea of jobs. Well, the idea of jobs itself is an old idea. However, the current situation bears out the whole map on what jobs are capable of doing and what they're not capable of doing. But back to the jobs. Under Clinton, the economy was booming. We had the tech boom. And then, of course, as Wild Bill was getting ready to saddle up to leave, and G.W. Bush, after stealing an election, was to appear, we then had a recession. Thus, much of the progress on the jobs front that Wild Bill Clinton made started to evaporate almost overnight. Now, that was the problem with the welfare to work scenario. Back to this old argument of jobs. And we grapple as a country with that today. How long will the jobs be there? Well, that's a situation that now is totally different in that we 20 years later face different problems. Automation, of course, obviously time itself. Del Monte laid off, will close a plant involving over 300 workers in the Midwest state of Minnesota. And roughly about 100 of those workers are full-time in a place called Sleepy Eye. And that plant has been there for over 100 years. They make tins of vegetables, or canned vegetables, green beans, corn, etc. And the situation there is a little bit different in that people have long since moved to frozen vegetables and vegetables that can be heated up in microwave oven. Various techniques are the availability of fresh vegetables from various places. Mexico, we think of various other countries and various places in the Americas. So you can get your green beans, your corn from those virtually year-round. So that has changed that dynamic. And also robotics has come into it. So today the whole question of a job is totally different. There was a conference, a large conference in China. Elon Musk was there. And Elon Musk argued that the artificial intelligence, as it is called, would eventually replace humans. In other words, the programs themselves would reprogram their programs. So in other words, you would basically have a situation, and that's somewhat today, where programs that get off too much on this. We do this, incidentally, on the open source report, but modules in terms of programs that are interoperative. In other words, you don't have to write the whole program anymore. But given the analytics in the program, the developer, will be able to self-propagate the programs. So in other words, you'll have less people writing code, less developers over time. As you see in the automobile industry now, you have less automotive engineers because of automation. Now that is a situation, is a time deal, that when you go into this whole thing of jobs, it equates you will have less jobs, period. A fellow made a comment the other day about burger flippers. Well, the burger flippers at McDonald's and many of these other so-called fast food operations, the burgers are being flipped by machine. The people just verify the orders, say welcome to McDonald's or welcome to Five Guys or whatever the hell it is they're welcome to. So they're just mannequins basically in the scenario. Human ones, that is. So all of that is automated, and you eliminate a worker or two. Scrub machines are there, vacuum cleaners, they all run by so-called robotics. Knee surgery is done by so-called computer-assisted or robotic surgeries. All of these things are moving along there. So eventually they will eliminate jobs, as much as some other things Voice technology had effectively eliminated medical scribes, medical types that used to transcriptionists, I'm trying to say. But I've noticed myself, my encounters with medical institutions, they actually bring in people with laptops that literally type up the conversation. So we're not sure why they are there. They don't really need to be there. But anyway, that is kind of an overview of what is actually going on. So back to Joe Biden's bail. Well, they'll spin him around a few times like an old machine in a laundromat. But how much they will get out of the spin is very difficult to say. They'll have the 10 on the stage in Houston. They'll go over these basic things. Joe Biden will give his take on climate change. And climate change is a long-term process. 10 or 12 years at the least. 20 to 30 years at the outset. That's when you talk climate change. So in other words, you're looking at 2020, 2024, 2028. The bail keeps turning with that. But as far as sentencing, cash bail, that sort of thing, those are movements that have to be done. For the most part, they can be done, obviously, in the federal arena. But at the same time, when you're talking with states, you have to deal with that. Same thing as voting. You have a situation there. You can pass federal laws. They need to be updated. But then you have 50 units, such as Florida, who's coming online in 2020 with new voting machines, and they'll have a little slip, very similar to what you get in an ATM. That technology has been out there since the 70s. So, in other words, if you work around the edge, some of these things get cleared up. Get into some of the emotional issues, such as individual beliefs with medical personnel. Should they participate in abortion? Should the pharmacist, chemist dispense various types of birth control, etc.? And the issue of Planned Parenthood, they of course are withdrawn from the federal program. And then we get to wider issues here, Medicare for all. What Joe Lunchbox Biden would do about that. He's in favor of a single payer incorporated with the Affordable Care Act and forwarding it up. That was the original idea when we did the Affordable Care Act. We were going to do single payer along with it. I have a single payer component. But the reactionaries and opportunists in the House and Senate killed that bill. Now, will the U.S. as a country go to Medicare for all in a straight single payer? Yes. But the economic conditions have to be there to provide that. So much is now weighted on the economy. And the economy is front and center. And people need to understand what's going on. Yes, you have tariffs out there, but tariffs are not the major problem. The major problem is demographics. The major problem is automation. And those are things you have to look at within the U.S. nation. Basically, not only that, but you look at elections. This whole idea of so-called foreign intervention is secondary. The problems are caused by states and the people that run the state election bureaus, and by voter suppression of voters, is what happened in Georgia. And under the Secretary of Time was Kemp, who is now the governor of Georgia. And the same thing with the governor that is in Florida, DeSantis. Those are the things that really bring in and ring out there. Yes, there's cyber activity there also. So this is the barrel. We'll move on from the barrel to the other parts of our roundup here, and let's see what pops up first on our screen. Things always pop up. Incidentally, some programming notes while we are here. The special Labor Day program will be on a Sunday tomorrow. It'll be posted. And then the Monday morning quarterback will be in its usual slot on a Monday. I think we covered Christine Gillibrand. She's no longer in the barrel. She's ended her presidential campaign and said adios amigo to the campaign, along with Seth Morton. He is from the Commonwealth. He didn't have a chance to begin with. Inslee out of Washington State, the governor there. He had no chance. He was going to be the climate person. And John Hickenlooper, he's running for the Senate in his home state of Colorado. Now, just because you don't meet the requirements does not mean that you have to abandon your presidential bid, but a lot of that out there is out there. And various people that are still in it, like Kamala Harris, California, said that Gillibrand is a brave voice on some of the most critical issues facing our country, from child care to sexual assault. She's a champion. I know she's not done fighting for women or for families. Well, no doubt about that. She was the first Democrat, incidentally, to call out former Senator Al Franken. And we did a special on Al Franken, the case of Al Franken and injustice, no doubt. And she replaced Hillary Rodham Clinton in the Senate in 2009, when Hillary Rodham Clinton became the Secretary of State under Barack Obama. She won a House seat she's from a conservative district. That was in 2006, upstate New York. Won re-election to the Senate in 2018, so she'll be there a long time. So will not have to run again until 2024. So she does a long time. Then she can also run for president if she so desires again in 24. The woman is only 52 years old. Now, hey, we already talked about Kate Ivey, the governor of Mississippi, and her little blackface operation she was going along with there. And we're going to save the small farming towns football season, ice. Also this week, the 4-day AT&T workers' strike has officially ended. This is Dateline. Who's writing this? WLKY out of Louisville, Kentucky. Julie Dolan is here. AT&T strike officially ended at 2 a.m. on Wednesday, according to the Communications Workers of America Local 3310. That's when I got the word, according to Roby. Now we are just working to let everyone know that the strike started on Friday at midnight. That was of last week. Union members said the company sent representatives to the negotiating table, which were not qualified. Now, also noting here that Bernie Sanders did join the AT&T workers' strike picket line in Louisville, Kentucky. The communication workers and members, speared in solidarity over the last 4 days, showed the company that we will not back down until they bargain with us in good faith. District president named Richard Honeycutt. This is a historic strike that shows the power that working people have when they join together. Talk that there may be a tentative agreement to a contract later on Wednesday anyway. These were 600 workers here. We'll have more on this on our Labor Day program from the communications workers, and a breakdown actually what is involved in the strike in terms of the numbers of people in other states outside of Florida. It went into Louisiana and several other states. Another here, the actress has died. She was an incredible actress. She was on the Mary Tyler Moore Show and Valerie Harper, and she was 80 years old. and she was with Mary Tyler Moore. And then there was a spin-off called Rhoda. They're a very enjoyable show. We enjoyed it very, very much. And another little side note, we'll have more on this on the Open Source Report, which will come up sometime in the next few days. The Twitter CEO's account was hacked. Jack Dorsey. Obscenity, racial slurs, threats from the company, doing basically what they call a SIM card switch. That's when an individual calls up some provider and pretends to be the person that has the account, gets a SIM card, and the rest, as they say, is history. And a little note here on DJ Trump's visit, I suppose, to the African American History Museum. And Lonnie Bunch the third describes a private tour. Oh, this is he gave Trump, calling that Trump reacted to the Dutch role in global slavery was, you know, they love me in the Netherlands. Oh, well. Very strange indeed. We'll have to read his autobiography or his biography, and bring that up. In other news, another Republican has bitten the dust. This is Representative Shimas, I suppose. Well, anyway, won't seek re-election. Joins a growing list of Republicans heading for the chief seat, so to speak. He is in Illinois. He's pictured here in the Washington Post with LaHood, who is I believe he's probably son. LaHood was a Republican and was in President Obama's administration. Rodney Davis in the Senate, I'm not sure, maybe not. And the minority whip, that is a guy out of Louisiana, Steve, next to a campaign sign, for Representative John Shimeras. Anyway, this is it. Nonetheless, back Shimeras, that's Shimkus. The growing list. He is from Illinois. He's in his 12th term. It's 24 years. Said on local radio he would not be back. It's been an honor in my lifetime to be asked by the people of Illinois to represent them in our nation's capital. That's what he told Mark Reardon on KOMX AM. I think KOMX is out of St. Louis. Anyway, somewhere around that area. He is the 14th Republican to announce he will not run next year. Will resign and will seek a different office, including 3 in Texas, who won re-election by less than 5 percentage points in 2018. He won re-election by, that is Shimas, by a landslide. Last year, his seat's expected to stay in Republican hands. Now, this is a seat, interesting enough, that Senator Durbin, Democrat out in Illinois, used to be in that seat. He was elected, this is, Shimas was elected in 1996. And he attended the U.S. Military Academy, served in the Army, worked as a high school teacher before running. He's 61 years old. Some of his friends is Steve Scalise, I finally got his name right here, and old Kevin Brady, who is not running either. He was a ranking Republican on the House Ways and Means Committee. And then some guy named Eric Paulson of Minnesota. They were together, but none of these characters are around anymore. They have ridden off into the sunset. Let's do the Space Force here. We'll have more on the Space Force. Rocky start is bad news for America. This is Washington Post. The person that did the article here is Namarita Goswami. Anyways, independent analysts and the offer of outer space and great powers. After a long, confusing bureaucratic process, the U.S. Space Command finally launched. For a Space Command may sound futuristic. The difficulty for the administration is having in establishing related Space Force does not bode well for the American people in a new so-called space race. Now, G.J. Trump appeared enthusiastic about a space command, and no doubt about that. He's probably planning on flying himself. Floated the idea of a Space Force in March of 2018, directed the Pentagon to establish one in that year. And he returned repeatedly, but he has ceased the establishment of a separate Space Force as a new branch. Well, I suppose this is different. That's a shame because the new space service has a vital role, according to this character. In other words, what they're doing here is pushing the militarization of space. An independent space service essentially to maintain a U.S. primacy in space. A separate service will gather space professionals from their parent services to start a unique culture focused on frontier empowerment and the think of space, including recruitment, training, and subsequent promotion on its own terms. Well, we don't need that. The administration's quest to establish this service has been plagued by bureaucratic meddling, policy confusion. The Armed Services Committee, the Senate Armed Services Committee, approved legislation that would establish a separate military service of space, standing alongside services such as the Army, Navy, etc. But in the House, they said, hell no. Space Corps within the Department of the Air Force, well, it should be. A little politics played there, and politics rules. If Congress is confused, lawmakers at least trying to get something done. The Pentagon asked by Trump to work on a separate space proposal was against the establishment of a separate service. That has been brought out, a gag order there. Discussion of the subject with historical consequence was ceded to those, including late-night comedians, etc., who now understood space, well, I keep saying space, thinkers. Without a healthy democratic discussion, we're left with strategic incoherent regarding the space strategy. This is unfortunate, reversal of a critical movement, muddling the bipartisan legislation by President Barack Obama, what he signed when he gave the Department of Defense a vital role in securing public interest in space. China and Russia are changing their concept of the utility of outer space rather than treating space just as a military force multiplier, providing a satellite support to their major military services. These nations see space for its own merits, including the promise of multi-trillion-dollar economy that awaits those who develop the capacity to extract. Now, this again is resources on the moon and asteroids. In other words, they really want to mine the moon. Now they moved on to the asteroids. They've already destroyed the environment here on Earth, so they're moving other places to destroy. In China, the PLA, Strategic Force support as a separate service equally to the Army, Navy, Air Force, and rocket forces there, and as loyally to the Communist Party of China. If the Trump administration leaves space strategy in the hands of vested bureaucrats, a little interest in understanding the radical new future, space may be less free, the U.S. may be poor, and less free the result. Well, that is a bunch of hooey there. They are already talking about missions to Mars, etc. Potential they've been talking about a long time of not only mining resources on these out stations in the of a Star Wars vision, not a Star Trek vision, minerals and putting colonies up there. They'll all be up there. Let me just look at our time here. We'll go, unfortunate story here. We invite you to tune in to our special, the state of Oklahoma versus Johnson & Johnson, the problem with opioids. This is a report autopsy of Staggs. Had opioids and alcohol in his system at the time of his death. Very unfortunate there, but the man, and we'll have more on him on the Monday Morning Quarterback. He was, of course, a pitcher for the Angels. Had opioids. This is on July the 1st. That's according to toxicologist report from Tarrant County Medical Examiner. The cause of death is a mixture of ethyl oxycodone and phenol, with a terminal aspiration of gastric contents, meaning the pitcher choked on his own vomit. Boy, very sad as he lay in his bed. That usually happens. That happened to me. Anyway, was a entertainer back. He was, police said there was no sign of trauma. Well, it wouldn't be a sign there. And there was no foul play in it. Found dead 2 days after starting when they were playing the series in Texas. Officials went to his room at around 2:18 when he didn't show up to the ballpark. And from the family, and we'll have more on this on the Monday Morning Quarterback, completely out of character for someone who worked so hard to become a Major League Baseball player and had a very promising future in the game he loved so much, and alluded to team worker involvement in this situation. Well, the man had a lot of, we're grateful for the work of the detectives in the South Lake Police Department, their ongoing investigation of circumstances surrounding Tyler's death. They hired somebody named Rusty Harden to assist them. Rusty Harden is a known factor. Today's opioid sensitive environment, no logical prescriber would give someone that combination of drugs unless they were in severe terminal pain. That's according to James Schaefer, a healthcare attorney and pharmacist at Burger and Boger. Anyway, a healthy 27-year-old should not be given those three things. And the test showed trace amounts of opioids, all of which are banned, but a significant amount of alcohol. So his alcohol level was 0.112. The legal limit is 0.08 for impairment. So in other words, he drank a lot. So basically, other things, but basically the man was alcohol poisoned there. And just very, very sad for this family, for Major League Baseball, which further reinforces the problems with opioids to begin with. And opioids have caused problems many times before. Various types of drugs, pills out there that people take with alcohol. So if you ingest large quantities of alcohol, that's not unusual. In bars, people buy Oxy. Usually, though, they do not have fentanyl with it there, but fentanyl in injection form. I know when I had my angiogram, they give you a little bit of fentanyl there. It's injected, not a pill. But again, we didn't drink a liter of alcohol there at the same time. Anyway, let's see what else we have on deck here today. This is a little bit more on the Space Command. Trump administration, this on August the 29th in the Vergy, I suppose how you pronounce their name. Anyway, title of this one is Trump's administration stands up for Space Command as the fate of the Space Force is still undecided. Basically, it's about the same thing as the newly combat command. Spacecom will defend America's vital interests in space. the next war-fighting domain. That's according to DJ Trump. Formally established the organization, the new U.S. Space Command isn't actually new. The military once had a space command established back in a little bit more historical here content in 1985. After there was a push to focus on space. It operated nearly 20 years, but after September 11th, wanted to focus more on warfighting in the North. Space Command got tucked into the U.S. Strategic Command out in Omaha, which is focused on nuclear deterrence. And the Joint Force Space Component Command, which is focused on nuclear deterrence. Since then, the military's space strategy has come out a combination. The Combat Command for the Joint Force Component Command. Space Command is a different entity from Trump's proposed Space Force. If the Space Force becomes a thing, it will focus on organizing, training, and equipping. This means figuring out what kind of space assets need to be made, such as satellites for surveillance, communications, navigation, and more. Building those satellites, training people, of course, to operate them. For the space, that entails figuring out how to integrate the use of these satellites into the Department of Defense's mission. All of the combatant commands that all have their own warfare. Now, this is interesting here, and we looked at his site. Bill Whedon, he's Director of Program Planning for Secure World Foundation, organization that promotes sustainable space solutions. Tells Virgie how does space fit into the command. Space is now going to be helping with that. The Space Command, the other big responsibility of the Space Command is to come up with a military playbook for space-related scenarios. The biggest thing that Combat Command does is think about all the bad things that happen in the area of control. That's what Whedon said, and then they put together a plan of how to respond to all of these bad things that could happen. For instance, if some foreign adversary were to, say, hack a U.S. surveillance satellite, the Space Command would have the detailed checklist of how to respond to such an event. They would figure out a protocol for those who are in charge of handling the situation. Very little is actually changing except for some bureaucratic reshuffling. The organization is still being run by the same person, General Raymond, except he doesn't need to report to the leader of this USS whatever. Much of the same personnel who are working there anyway. Two main components of the Space Command will be organizations that are already in operation. The Combined Space Operations Center at Vandenberg Air Force Base and the National Space Defense Center in Colorado is in charge of enhancing the nation's space capability. Incidentally, this foundation is also in Colorado and in Washington. Space Defense Operations is responsible for identifying and warning against threats to U.S. space assets, and for now it is unclear how the resignation of a Space Command will change things. In the meantime, the future of the Space Force has yet to be decided. Decision may come once again in the Defense Authorization Act of 2020. For now, the new minted Space Command will be in full swing starting today, and that's all they had to say about the Space Command. Anyway, so we'd spend a little bit of time on the Space Command. Hurricane Dorian. We don't want to forget Hurricane Dorian. Let's get to it. Sorry about this. But this scenario will change. We're falling back again on the Sun Sentinel in Orlando, Florida. Dorian is tracking north with winds about 140 miles an hour. That hadn't changed. Slightly north on Friday night when we were looking at this for the National Hurricane Center in Florida. what appears to be better news for Florida. Most of the state remains in the core of uncertainty. It's a Category 4 storm, which could be near the east coast of Florida late Monday. The maximum sustained winds are 140 miles an hour. Some additional strengthening is possible later tonight, Saturday night. The track is slightly heading generally northwest, with Dorian 145 miles east of West Palm Beach, Florida. Incidentally, a former Prime Minister of Canada tweeted that perhaps the Margalotta Hotel would basically be blown into the sea. And then later retweeted another tweet saying that hopefully they were fully prepared. Some people objected to what she had to say. Dorian is expected to slow on Monday evening as it nears the Florida coast, makes landfall anywhere within possibly, now this is Tuesday afternoon. That could and could not happen. We went over some scenarios from the Washington Post about how this young climatologist type felt it would be. The latest atmospheric data indicates that the slow-moving hurricane could start its much-anticipated wheel to the north before reaching Florida. But the Hurricane Center said models have not been consistent at the entire east coast, and there's some instances that it will trend and hit the Carolinas. DeSantis warned the Floridians on Friday that Dorian could be a multi-day storm. That's what, and he has an emergency declaration, and so does DJ Trump. Everybody's trying to get into that act. Half of Florida gas stations were empty, as Politico reported. Preparing for the hurricane were in full gear. The state patrol was due to escort gas trucks into the region. Troopers were also loading trucks of bottled water to bring down. So they're getting ready. Yeah, what is H getting ready? She's in Palm Beach or somewhere around there. Anyway, let's see. Fort Lauderdale, he's also did sandbag giveaway. Estimated 5,000 bags, 70 tons of sand were given to residents. Broward County, I think that's where H. Hallie Castor Jane is located, somewhere around there. Extended its landfill hours from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. every day, including weekends and Labor Day. Bulk trash, hazardous waste, electronics can be taken there. The Palm Beach school system announced that its 15 schools that serve as hurricane shelters were prepared to open if needed. So that's the story. I mean, they are ready. Tri-Rail plans to run a regular schedule Saturday and to figure out Sunday when they get to it. So they will do a light rail system there. And let's grab a little more as we get into the final part here. Incidentally, we're on iHeartRadio, various other outlets, Twitter, YouTube. We've got our audio presentation up there. You can find us there. Hopefully the RSS feed, etc. We'll look into all this. We need to get some things done. We also need to get a new logo up there. And catastrophic events. It's unclear whether the hurricane, this is from Reuters, will hit land, but the results were expected to be devastating, big-time impact, catastrophic events for some areas, 140 miles an hour. Not a good situation. This is from Graham. I'm not sure who Mr. Graham is, but Ken Graham. So, worrying unpredictable situation in Florida with the hurricane set to hit land somewhere up its east coast and potentially lingering in the state. If it doesn't linger there, to go somewhere else. Mindful of that one in Cocoa Beach, mayor putting up storm shutters on his home. In places like that, they have that around. Malik said the forecast that Dorian could set over Florida for up to 2 days, dumping 18 inches, that is 46 centimeters. DJ Trump, he's at Camp David. I guess he wasn't at Mar-a-Lago either. He took the warning from the former Canadian Prime Minister. Anyway, we're thinking about Florida evacuations, but it's a little bit too soon. We'll make that decision on Sunday. Anyway, at Fort Pierce, the mayor there, Hudson, urges 46,000 residents who plan to evacuate not to delay. course, this causes some things on I-95 North and I-75 North. The turnpike lots are full. Dorian's, of course, is obviously unpredictable. One of Florida's last major hurricanes, Emma, swept up the peninsula instead of hitting the east coast. So we'll see on that one. In the Bahamas, Freeport International Airport was set to close. They've been hit down there. 2,000 National Guard types will be mobilized for hurricane by the end of Saturday. So they're getting them all out there. Only 1 in 5 nursing homes in Florida plan to rely on deliveries of emergency generators to keep their air conditioning running if Dorian knocks out the power. There's a problem there. Some people are going to jail from the last one. North of Cape Canaveral, the Kennedy Space Center, 400-foot tower, that's 122. Middle East launch tower was dragged inside a towing vehicle. So in other words, they're storing things away, getting ready for the big one to appear. Let's see if we have any. No, we don't. I think we're running out of planning here. Oh, just a minute here. Need to get the baseball scores. Can't forget the baseball scores. Nonetheless, out west, the D-backs and Dodgers are 5-4. Hope that stands up. And the Sox and Angels in Los Angeles. Sox 6-4. Brewers and Cubbies in Wrigley Field. Cubs 7-1. Easily took care of that. And Jose Quintana took a shutout into the sixth. Good there. Cubs had 11 hits, no errors, and the Brewers 8 hits. The Marlins were in D.C. Nationals 7-6. Nationals had 9 hits, 2 errors, and the Marlins 8 hits. The Athletics and Yankees in New York. The Athletics pulled this one out. Oakland finally won it 8-2. They had 12 hits, no errors, and the Yankees. The Mets and Phillies in Philly. The Mets 11-5 after being pommeted by the Cubbies. The Astros and Blue Jays in Toronto. It was the Astros 7-4. The Astros had 13 hits, 1 error, and Toronto 8 hits and 1 error there. Cleveland and the Rays. The Rays shut out Cleveland, and then the Twins and the Tigers in the Motor City. Twins 13-5. They had 14 hits, no errors, and Tigers 12 hits and 1 error. The White Sox in Atlanta. Atlanta 10-7. The Mariners and Rangers in Texas. Rangers 6-3. A team that's going nowhere. And the Orioles and Kansas City, which has been sold. Orioles 14-2 over KC. Pirates and Rockies in Denver. The Pirates 9-4. Pirates had 16 hits, no errors, and high hitting game at least, and the Rockies had 10 hits and 2 errors, but they didn't result in home runs. Padres and Giants in San Francisco. Giants 8-3. Madison Bumgarner allowed 1 run over 7 innings to tie Matt Cain for the most pitched. Anyway, and the Reds and Cardinals in St. Louis was postponed. Let's see if I can get to a little bit of college football here. We hope. We won't go over what is being played today. Florida Atlantic at Alabama at South Alabama, at Nebraska. We'll skip over. The Oregon Ducks will be at Auburn. Interesting. Excuse me. Scores here: University of Miami and Florida 24-20 in that contest. That was on. Whoops. These very old scores here. Sorry about that. Now, we finally get down to something here on Friday night. Michigan State, number 18, 28-7 over the Tulsa. Wisconsin, 49-zip. They shut out South Florida. And that is the end of our ball scores and the end of us. This has been The Week That Was on the last day of August 2019. Boston Red, the Jerry Pippen Memorial broadcast booth here. For those in Florida, my friend Haley, etc. Haley, well, duck and dodge, my friend. Find shelter if you need it. If you don't, you can watch it on TV. Definitely tell us what happens. Actually, I'm very concerned about what happened to DJ Trump.